at Distributech 2023, one of the sponsors of these interviews, and these are interviews with thought leaders from around North America and the globe. Our sponsors are H2 Scan. H2 Scan is the leading sensor manufacturer for hydrogen sensing in a lot of different applications, in transformers, in battery room safety, in processes and safety, in industrial, and in the future hydrogen economy. So I want to thank our sponsors, and I want to thank all of our guests, and I hope you enjoy this interview. My next guest is Jackie Piero. We had a little bit of a thing. I thought she was in charge of U.S. policy for the Vancouver government up in BC, but she's not. It's actually in Vancouver, Washington. But Jackie, thanks for joining me. You were with Mobility
House, the Mobility House.
Mobility House, the Mobility House. We're going to get a lot into that at the end, but in the interim, tell me a little bit about how you got into the power industry, and then a little bit about your background with Mobility House and who they are, what they do.
I actually got into the power industry because I was starting a new career by going to graduate school, but I thought I was going to be working in fisheries management, marine management, and ended up working in offshore wind policy instead. Starting to learn about how to make new rules, new structures for a new industry. And one summer, my professor said, I have some funding to work on a thing with electric vehicles. Do you need funding? And the answer is always yes when you're in graduate school. And they were putting together the first vehicle-to-grid bidirectional prototypes for an electric vehicle. And working with Pepco Holdings and with PJM Interconnect to say, what can an electric vehicle be to those stakeholders in the energy ecosystem? And I've been doing it ever since.
And that's the Mobility House?
That's what I started out with. I worked for a company called Nuvi that did nothing but bidirectional electric vehicles. Just in the last few months, in September, I went with the Mobility House because they do work with bidirectional electric vehicles, but where this company really shines is in load management, dynamic load management of electrical vehicles, and that's partly just to minimize operational costs, time of use rates, man charges, but then also to allow us to cram more electric vehicles into a parking lot than the connection should be able to serve, and potentially avoid upgrades to the site level infrastructure.
Okay, and we're going to talk a lot more about that. But you've been around, you've seen some change, especially given what you just said about your background. Last year at IEEE PEST&D, we did these interviews, and when I asked people, what are the biggest challenges facing utilities? Number one, supply chain, and it just stayed. Everybody else, supply chain. So finally I was saying, I'm sick of supply chain issues. They are still there. We have mitigated them to some extent. They're still there. Sometimes they're worse, like transformers. Many power transformers are 3 to 3.5 years out, okay? So you've got a grid that is aging. You're having to, because of age and condition, because we have stressed our infrastructure as it is. So you've got aging condition that says we got to replace them. Now you got, when we've had this very flat level, hey, this is what the power's needed. Now you got a little bit of a tick, and it's about to become a hockey stick. Bloomberg announced today, I think it was, maybe yesterday, my days are running together, but they had some statistics on the adoption of EV. They announced, and they do a quarterly update, they announced at this quarter's update that whatever they said, it's 2.4x of that. So if you were planning on this, you're now needing to plan on 2.4x of that. And that's what's happening in the industry. And we're getting rid of base load. We're using more offshore, we're using more onshore wind, solar. There's a lot going on in the industry. Supply chain issues are not just the issues anymore. As you look at the industry, what do you think the significant challenges that the utility industry is facing?
I think unfortunately, it does come back to the supply chain issues, but it's not just that. It was industrial consolidation over the last few years that have sort of changed how we're getting transformers and switchgear and the basic components that you need to upgrade a site. The Biden administration activated the Defense Production Act for grid components in April of this year, April 2022, I think, or May. That was before a single dollar of federal funding went out the door for NEVI. That's the high-powered alternative fuel routes that are going to go through every state. Before any of the 6X low-no funding, which is for transit buses, went out the door, and before any of the clean school bus funding went out the door at the EPA. And so it's not just 2.5 times EVs. I think that medium and heavy duty EVs were hardly even being forecasted.
Right.
They were hardly even being modeled because everybody thought it was out here. And utilities, and I don't blame them, I was with them, saw the curve of adoption, going like this. But I think the medium and heavy duty was out under the curve. And what the Biden administration has done, which I'm very happy about, is brought the medium and the heavy duty here. And that curve is now going to look like stair steps. And those stair steps are the challenge. Because we are working in a constrained environment, time, labor, but also those grid components, and we have a tidal wave of electrification coming at us that's higher powered than anyone was thinking.
Yeah. One of your, I noticed on your job description, it was policy, right? Tell me what you do around policy, because I want to follow up on that, because you just mentioned policy. Now we got another policy, the IRA, stupid name for a policy, Inflation Reduction Act, but I didn't make it up. But it got the point across. But we've now got some policy changes, for instance, on wind, that makes it much easier to plan, because we got like a 10-year planning. At least now we know that some things are consistent. So there's some policy decisions that governments make that actually change everything, right? You just mentioned some of them. But tell me what you do as it relates to policy for the Mobility House.
What I do and what I've always done is work with new technologies that are being brought to the grid, to the automotive industry, that may not actually fit into the existing structures that we have. And so it's a matter of being able to tell my company, what are you really allowed to do with this great new technology you have? Where do we fit into the existing structures? Where do we need to push on those walls a little bit? And where do we need to just start over and get an entirely new set of regulatory structures, funding, and even metering technologies around what it is that we're trying to do to actually enable us to participate in the industry. And so right now, I am trying to take this idea of load management, of utilities being able to trust that software and hardware together can keep the aggregate usage of EVs below the level of their connection, of the load panel, and not actually overwhelm it, not cause a fault that could travel up their system. We don't have those structures in place right now, but we need them, because otherwise we're not going to electrify. And all of that funding, all of those new initiatives from the Biden administration will be threatened.
So the Mobility House does what specifically?
We're particularly interested in transit and in school buses. And what we do is charging energy management. So we will work with the company that sold the charging stations, work with the company that sold the vehicles themselves, and with the customer. We'll be able to minimize your operating costs, so you don't need to worry about time of use rates or demand charges actually increasing your mobility costs. Then we can also work on mitigating capital investment, so hopefully making it so you either don't need to upgrade your grid, or you can plan out your phases so that upgrades can happen in an orderly time in partnership with your utility. But also we can monitor your chargers for faults. Just one of the big problems facing the industry right now, the EV industry, is charger reliability. They go down all the time. So 24 hours a day, we are watching that charger to make sure that it's actually up and running for you.
Okay. Any system, any charge, because that's one of the things that bothers me about the kind of, it's beginning to coalesce with some standard, right? But I can go anywhere in the country and I can pump gas in my car. You know why? It's because I have a nozzle, I have a hole. The people that make the holes know what they make. The people that make the nozzles know what they do, and the people that run the gas up know both, and suddenly work. That's not true of the EV industry. Is that more true in the fleet, like transit buses? I would also think that delivery has got to be a big thing, Amazon type delivery. That those are large fleet volume things, and they've got to figure out how to get them all recharged at night when they're not delivering things, right? And put a load on the utility. So there's a utility problem, but there's also a UX, UE. I'm struck. I rented a utility. I won't buy a utility until they fix it, because I was so afraid that I couldn't, because I went to a charging station when I had 38% left. I didn't quite know how it would work, and it wouldn't work because I was not in a Tesla and I was at a Tesla charging station. I mean, I was so frustrated, and I think other people get that way too. Now, I'm older, so I get frustrated more easily with technology.
I think everybody is right there with you.
Okay, good. I'm glad it's
just
not
you.
me. Yeah. So what are some of the solutions to that?
So Mobility House agrees with you. We definitely believe in open standards. So standards that everybody can use. You have every EVSE using it and every car using it, so that, for example, if we are managing an EVSE, a charging station for a customer, and we for some reason don't renew our contract, somebody else can come in and run it for them.
Okay, yeah.
too. That interoperability is the bedrock of real commercialization and real scale rollout. And both the federal and state governments are prioritizing this in their funding and in their, their different credits that they're giving out. They are putting down technical standards that say you need to use open standards. We all have to agree that these are all going to work the same way, because otherwise we're never going to get where you need us to go, so that you're comfortable in an EV. And you're the guy we need in an EV, not the early adopters. It's the people that are waiting for it to be simple.
I loved the car. It was a Volkswagen ID4. I loved the car, but I won't buy one until I can go somewhere and get it charged up.
We're going to get there.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. You see one of our sponsors here, H2 Scan. I read something about a bus system, buses made in Portugal, the charging system made somewhere else, but it was in Wiesbaden, Germany. And they bought all these transit buses, and they bought a hydrogen fueling station to do all this stuff. It didn't work. The fueling station was a problem. It didn't work. It sends such a ripple, like, why am I going to be buying hydrogen fueled buses when you don't have a good system? It's a similar problem that if we don't do it well, the people like me and the people, there'll be fewer early adopters if we don't do it well. So I'm just a plea to you to help make those standards work that's there. Talk to me. Go ahead.
It is interesting, because the cell phone industry is a perfect analogy. That they went through, balkanization. They went through interoperability struggles. They went through, all these various steps, and everyone has sort of said, we like where it ended up, and we want to start there with EVs. And we're going to have to, maybe we can proceed through that faster, but we are going to have to go through those stages. But I think we're further along than people realize.
I have to show you this. This is what? An iPhone, right?
Yes.
Okay, with a grandbaby that I have a picture of in there. But what I really want to say is, I used rotary phones all the time, a lot. This, compared to that, is completely different. It's a completely different thing. I have now adopted this and adapted, and my wife is incredibly good at using this in a lot of different ways. And I think that's the transition that we're going in as a total. We've got to get user experience being part of the whole, and especially as you talk about workers. We have fewer of them. They have to be better trained, better able to service, better able to do work. And the more complex we make systems, the less able they are to do that. But that you already know that because you're a policy person.
Yeah, but I think, it starts even just with the drivers, like when we work with a new transit agency, with a new school bus, or with a new school district, the drivers even have to get comfortable
Exactly.
with it. But very quickly, the task really, it's like you with the ID4, you got to get the person in it. And the cars themselves, they are a great experience. People love them.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so we've made it there. They are good cars. They're cars that people want to drive. But I think you're right. That refueling experience, we're still figuring out who needs what. Who needs really, really fast gas station charging? Who needs a great charging station at their house and they're never going to need to charge outside of it? Yeah. Who needs workplace charging? Where do we need lamppost charging?
Yeah, because people living in apartments get left out because
exactly.
they can't put a charging station
that
in their apartment.
That is the nut that everyone's trying to crack, is that multifamily case. And, everyone recognizes that's going to be one of the biggest scale tasks that we have. But we're definitely working on it. It's not being ignored.
Good. So 10 years from now, I want you to fast forward, and let's assume we solve many of these problems right there. Where is the mobility house 10 years from now? Where do you think the company's going to be? Is it going to stay in that fleet type, transit area, or are you going to broaden what you do? I mean, you obviously, if you're looking at policy, and you just told me you use policy to advise, where do you think strategically the mobility house is going to be 10 years from now?
I have a decent preview because we're actually the United States version of our company. The company itself is over 10 years old, and it is based in Germany. And in Europe, the company is actually retailing energy for EV rates to individual homeowners. They are aggregating electric vehicles and participating directly into European spot markets for wholesale energy. They're definitely working on getting V2G off the ground there. And so I think, 10 years from now, what I'd like to see and what I think we'll see is as vehicle to grid gets more and more common, there'll be more and more structures with my help for them to be aggregated and used to actually help support the electric system. Utilities will understand better what EVs can be for them rather than just an unpredictable, potentially problematic load, that they're actually an asset. And my company will be still doing load management, still making sure that your car is charged when it needs to be without you needing to do anything, still minimizing the costs, but also then aggregating, participating, and figuring out how to both make you money at it, but also how to make EVs an asset to the energy system.
That is a great answer. Thank you so much. My guest, Jackie, thank you so much. My guest, Jackie Piero, you will hear more about EVs. I'd like to include you in some future issues we're doing about EV as a technical advisor to what we do at APC Technologies. We're creating a brand new brand, if you will, green energy technology. And I hadn't thought about who was going to be my technical advisor on green edge technology. I'd like you to consider being that, or that woman will hunt you down, okay? That would be
sounds
brilliant.
Great.
Thank you.
I love talking about this stuff. You can't stop.
I know you do. And you do it well, too. This has been an APC Technologies production, and we thank you for joining us. Our sponsors have been H2 Scan and Distributech. And of course, the communities of APC Technologies, which is Transform Technology, Power Systems Technology, Green Energy Technology, and Women in Power Systems. So thank you.